Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, April 14th, 2025, and I bring this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. We do, pursuant to Council Rule 28, the public comment period at committee meetings is limited to items that appear on the committee agenda. All public comment speakers must present proof of Tennessee residency. With us today, we have Mr. Steve Wrighton, who's going to be speaking with a concern about RS 2025-1149. Council members, as we prepare to hear our public comment, please remember, if you are on the committee, to please put up your committee tag, your yellow tag. If you have a yellow tag up and you're not on the committee, please remember to remove that. And with that, we're going to give our attention to Mr. Ryder at the back. You are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'd like to commend Councilmember Allen for getting a clarification on a concern I had regarding what would happen to Samaritan Ministries. The understanding from the administration is that not only will be acquiring this property that's the old Wendy's, but also acquiring Samaritan Ministries. Samaritan Ministries has a long history in that neighborhood. The administration said they were actively looking for another piece of property. That's kind of a difficult assignment these days to be able to do that. Hadley Park is a park that has been a major part of the community, in the Black community, and Samaritan Ministries has been there for ages. So I'd respectfully ask the administration to work with Samaritan Ministries to find a location. I understand the need for another library at Hadley Park. I've got no objection to that. But I am very concerned about Samaritan Ministries. It is a fixture in the community. It serves a lot of people who are struggling. And the meals that they serve there are very critical. And I know that for me, that is a very big issue, because we're losing a lot of places, food pantries, and everything else in this town. And the need out there is greater than ever. So please, I'm asking the Mayor, Freddie O'Connell, to work with Samaritan Ministries so we can find a path forward that works for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you for coming and speaking and bringing that to our attention. Before we get started with our agenda, on our agenda, at the beginning of our agenda, we do have a Finance Department presentation on fund balance reserve policies. So if you will direct your attention to the front or to one of our mini screens in the chamber, and I'm going to allow the Finance Department to speak, and if you all can introduce yourselves, you are recognized.
Hello, I'm Janine Reed, Director of Finance.
Hi there, Amanda Deaton-Moyer, Assistant Director for Finance.
Hello, I'm Roland Cooch with Davenport & Company, based out of Richmond, Virginia. We've been engaged by Metro to assist with the development and refinement of the financial policies. Okay. Well, thank you, members of the committee and members of council. Again, I'm Roland Cooch. We're with Davenport & Company. Just a one-sentence introduction. We are a full-service municipal advisory firm that works with local governments in this exact task, which we're going to be talking about tonight, which is looking at fund balance policies as well as other policies we do from time to time with all of our clients. With that said, I'd like to walk through this presentation and give you an overview of the financial policy, reserve financial policies that you'll be looking at for consideration. Just a bit of a background. We were here probably about 3 years ago to this date, looking at the exact same topic, fund balance reserve policies. We helped and were engaged by the finance director at that time to help with crafting new financial policies, really that speaks to the reserves that Metro has in terms of keeping itself in good credit standing. Those policies, as a result of the work that we did, were adopted in early January of 2023. Fast forward to today, we are looking at those exact policies with the following amendments that I'll go through this presentation at a high level. But those amendments are designed to enhance Metro's ability to maintain future compliance. Because the important thing is, if you have a financial policy, to be in compliance with it, to show the credit markets that you're in compliance with it as well. The financial policies, these reserve policies, are also designed to promote long-term fiscal health. And the refinement here is also to provide clarifications for ease of use and review on an annual basis. So those are the big picture goals and objectives of this, this review and update. As a part of the process, we routinely look at something, when we look at something like this, it's an important aspect of financial management and fiscal integrity and health. We've looked at a variety of aspects here that really come into play when we think about what is an appropriate level of fund balance and reserves. Rating agency considerations are and industry best practices for financial policies. We also looked at comparable local governments and how they maintain financial policy guidelines as well and what goes into them. Looking at historical fund balance results and just seeing how they've trended over time, as well as comparative analysis of other local governments in terms of reserves as well. Because what we're talking about tonight is reserve levels and what an appropriate reserve level and fund balance policy would be. Moving into industry standards and rating agency criteria, I'm not going to go over every single word of this, but essentially the upgrade on this, the key takeaway on this slide is Metro received an upgrade in July of 2023 to a AA+. One of the primary focuses, or one of the things that was cited in terms of economy, but also financial best practices, the specific action and the adoption of the fund balance reserve policies in early 2023 was critical to achieving this upgrade and improving Metro's credit rating from the AA to the AA+ at that time. It was specifically cited by S&P. Most recently in 2024, the most current reaffirmation of Metro's credit rating, again, S&P cites credit strengths, specifically strong financial position and robust reserves with an expectation for ongoing budgetary balance. That expectation, those reserves are really there to help offset the credit challenges, specifically here an elevated debt burden, though recently mitigated there by some other factors, but they do cite that as well. What that effectively means in simple layman's terms is that your fund balance reserves really offset what could be, what appear to be a higher debt burden or elevated debt burden, which is what a lot of local governments have to deal with in terms of addressing older needs, deferred needs. So it's not uncommon. What could change, and S&P as well as the rating agencies always cite what could change the credit rating. So we are at this AA+, and they do say there's a positive upside, but there's also a negative upside. Positive upside includes a moderation, or if the debt burden decreases over time, or if reserves increase as well. But specifically on the negative side, deteriorating financial performance that would cause materially weaker reserves and liquidity. So any sort of deterioration in a fund balance level pursuant to what you've got today and in relationship to comparable peers, that could adversely affect the credit rating of Metro's government that it really has worked so hard to achieve and maintain. Moody's, the other credit rating agency, the second of the three national credit rating agencies that are most commonly used, looking at the most recent credit affirmation there, that's a AA2, which is comparable to S&P's AA. Now, one of the things that they've cited as well when we look at this is prudent fiscal management, ability to raise revenues to support reserves. So that's a consistent theme in terms of what you're seeing here, and that's what this fund balance policy is designed to promote and protect. The credit challenges, again, above average long-term liabilities. Again, it's a similar theme. They both recognize the two things that are, one, credit positive, which is the reserves. The second thing is a credit challenge, which is elevated debt burden. They go hand in hand and kind of offsetting each other. So Moody's does cite and will say the same things about what could change the rating upward, what could change the rating downward. One of the two things amongst the categories, amongst the things that they do cite in terms of their review, we wanted to say and highlight that they do specifically call out fund balance and reserve ratios. Now, when they look at this, what you'll note is that these ratios are slightly different than your policy. Wanted to point out they look at the whole Metro government. These fund balance reserves go into the calculation of what Moody's looks at in terms of your overall reserve levels. But they do cite that maintenance of reserves at approximately 30% of annual revenues from their perspective, that's holistically government-wide. That is to say, not just the general governmental funds, but also the enterprise funds. Look at that and say, okay, if we're looking at this level, this is going to be a credit positive. But if we deteriorate and fall backwards by about 10 percentage points to the 20% level, could have some credit challenges and put pressure on Metro's credit rating. So the next section, we'll get into a little bit of why reserves and fund balance matter. 5 key points here, but they're all really good, solid rationale for why reserves matter. One, first, the reserves, the more money you have in reserves that help you cash flow, help you operate on a day-to-day basis, it also allows that money to work for you. So that generates an additional interest income. And as again, the second point from a national credit rating agency perspective, that we just talked about is perhaps one of the most important financial metrics that is under Metro's direct control. You can control both the debt as well as the fund balance reserves. Both of those can be managed directly. Economy, other macroeconomic impacts that could have an impact on your rating, you really cannot control those as directly as you can control the reserve position. Third, what the reserves do, they help bolster your credit rating. You've got very strong AA+, AA2, as we just talked about with S&P and Moody's. That in turn allows for lower borrowing costs. Effectively, you're able to permanently finance your capital needs on a lower interest rate basis, the higher your credit ratings are. For example, that just saved you about $9.6 million in interest expense on the 2024 bonds alone. So over time, this will really build up as you think about, because debt is a perpetual use in terms of funding capital needs. The more you can generate lower costs of borrowing on this, the more you can save, and then turn that into more investment on the capital side. Less interest you pay, the more you can fund on the capital side. Fourth, strong credit ratings. Why reserves matter? It reinforces the credit rating. It also provides a strong signal to the economic development community and financial markets that Metro is really fiscally sound and a strong locality in which to invest. This is a qualitative aspect of it, but a very important nonetheless. When local governments are distressed, they find economic development harder to achieve, but when you have solid evidence and affirmation that you're doing the right thing, that signals to the community that Nashville metro area is a place for economic development. And lastly, the fund balance reserves, as good, healthy reserve policy, does create periods of stability during those times of variability and vulnerability. It's important to have that as kind of a safety net, so to speak. Ask a little bit of commentary on GFOA. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, Government Finance Officers Association. puts out a lot of bulletins, a lot of promulgations on best practices. One of the things that we often cite is that the GFOA recommends that a government maintain approximately no less than 2 months worth of operating reserves when it comes to that. That's about 16.7%. We rounded to 17%. That's how the target has been established. The financial reserves, the key aspect of that is, that's a starting point. It's not going to be that number for every local government. There are also mitigating factors that could have a local government have higher than that number or lower than that number. The financial policy should define also conditions for use and how those are replenished. Those are two key factors that are built into Metro's policy when originally implemented back in 2023. Those are still within the policy today. Lastly, one important note is that a government's particular situation may require a level of reserves, as I've mentioned, that could be in excess of the 17%, but then some of those measures really come into play and when the government does think about long-term sustainability and periods of cash flow and the ability to fund its needs on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. Just a little bit of a perspective here. You could see the fund balance per fiscal year, and that's the prior year's fund balance on the operating reserves, those three funds that are not the debt service funds. But you could see then also the percentage of the operating expenditures or percentage of the budget there. What's important to note here is that in 2022 to 2023, when Metro first implemented the new policy that we're talking about with revisions today, that number went up to the level that we're talking about in that and settled at about the 17% range by the time we go to 2025. 22-23 was the first adoption, kind of implementation. When you put that into effect there, you can see that Metro has really built up some solid reserves in these three funds. On the debt service fund balance side, again, that is graphically shown. Those bars are showing the dollar amount, but you can also see that line showing the percentage amount. And that policy has been built up to the 50% level as well. Putting it all together on this page, we combined all of the reserves and put them in context of the total dollar amount, but also on a percentage basis. And you can see that's hovering right around that 20% level, 21% level. That's a combination of your debt service fund balance as well as your operating reserves. And looking forward to this page, taking into context that we were just at about the 20% level from just looking at the reserves, but when we take a look at a credit rating comparison, this is using credit rating analysis, credit rating data, from the perspective of two key things I'd like to point out here. While we might have seen the reserves grow to a very healthy level in the last few pages, what this points out is that when we put all of the government-wide reserves together, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a lot of data on here. Two key numbers. Metro's ratio in 2024 was 40.8%. When we're looking at it big picture-wise, both on the general government as well as the enterprise funds. Looking at the peer median is 67.9%. So the key takeaway here is that while Metro has very healthy reserve levels, by no means is it overfunded in the reserve standpoint. When you look at the credit rating metrics, they're citing that Metro has healthy levels, but it's not overly excessive from this perspective. It's right at just under the peer median by about 27 percentage points or thereabouts. And you'll note the first series of bars there in blue, those are your major Tennessee comparative cities there, and they have substantially more reserves than Metro. So this leads us to the next section, which is the proposed fund balance reserve policy amendments. Looking at, I'm just going to highlight the key changes. The verbiage in the document really speaks to these points, but I'd like to summarize it at a high level here. The existing policy was already at 17% of budget operating expenditures. This is for the governmental funds, the non-debt service governmental funds. Within the existing policy, there was also a budget stabilization reserve. That is about 30% of that 17% figure functioned as a budget stabilization reserve. What's being proposed, and this is an enhancement and the strengthening of the policy, is that we're going to keep the target, the same 17% of budget operating expenditures, but we're establishing a separate new budget sustainability reserve that is in addition to the 17% target. The minimum target there is 1%, but could be up to a maximum of 6%, depending on the identification of the need to have more funds from a sustainability and protective standpoint. Debt service funds, again, the same concept here. The existing policies on the left-hand side target of 50% of budgeted debt service. That was implemented originally back in 2023, and an amount no greater than 3%, if so determined by the finance director at that time. The budget stabilization reserve was not applicable to this particular fund. What the proposed policy change is maintaining that 50%, so that did not change, but it establishes, again, that budget sustainability reserve that is in addition to the 50%. So we've expanded this sustainability reserve concept. And again, same minimum 1% target up to a maximum of 6% of the budgeted debt service fund expenditures. So what is the budget sustainability reserve? And again, this is the proposed policy change. We talked about the relationship there. It's about 1% of budget operating and debt service expenditures. So we've expanded that slightly to cover the debt service fund, or if so determined by the finance director, an amount based on expenditure and revenue projections that could be up to a 6%. We're not saying it's going to be 6%, but you've got the minimum of 1% there as a starting point. It's designed to be calculated in an amount that's estimated to be sufficient to cover transfers to help support the two key reserves there, the operating reserve fund and the debt service fund balance. That is to say, this is the flexible piece that's designed to help you be in compliance with the 17% and the 50% on a year-to-year basis. And then the last key point there is the finance director. Part of this reserve policy is the finance director will establish those requirements for the budget sustainability reserve with each budget ordinance. And again, that's based on future projections of the needs as well. What then is the budget sustainability reserve? How is it going to be used, or what are the requirements for it to be used? Upon meeting certain criteria, the budget stabilization fund, sustainability reserve, that should be sustainability reserve, in the event of an economic downturn can be used. That's no change from the existing policy. So there's 4 key criteria in there in addition to an economic revenue downturn. So that stays within the policy. There's no change there. But also, as I've mentioned previously, as may be necessary to maintain those minimum targets in the 17% in your general funds as well as the 50% in the debt service funds. Other proposed changes, really the first bullet point is not a significant change. That really was just moved around the document. So I wanted to point it out if we did look at a track changes version. But really the operating reserve and debt service fund balances, those are your key reserves there that really are only to be used after the depletion or all other contingency funds have been exhausted. So these are your last resort funds to be used, but these are your reserves that are designed to be there year in and year out at the 17% and the 50% level. But the replenishment bullet point down there is a slight change to that. If amounts are used, then Metro shall adopt a plan to restore such amounts to the minimum targets within 36 months. That was there before. But now, if there's a difficult hardship in doing that, we've specified an outside range of time frame, which is no more than 60 months. So it's a range of 3 to 5 years to plan to rebuild those reserves if there's an event of use in any one of them. Next page has other proposed changes. Again, this is a reallocation of appropriated funds. Just to put this into the policy here to outline a little more clarity on this. Any appropriations, this talks about appropriations, appropriated funds or reallocation of those from surplus fund balance. All appropriations from that surplus fund balance that are not used within a 12-month time frame from the finance director's release shall be reviewed on an annual basis to determine their continued need. This is designed to allow those types of funds or those released funds not to be continued on year after year after year and just held out there without having a bona fide purpose for them. Any allocation that meets this criteria, there's designed to work with the department head such that if there's a justification for the use of these to re-extend them, that's put into place. But if there's not a justification, if the project ceases to exist or just the priorities change, then the Director of Finance is authorized to return these appropriations back to the fund from which they came to the extent unless otherwise permitted by law. So it's designed to give you more flexibility to make sure that those funds are being put to good use year in and year out. The last series of slides here talks about the application of surpluses. This is the waterfall that's already built into the policy. With the slight changes that we put into place here, the modifications of the policy with specifically with respect to the budget sustainability reserve, the policy has been modified to account for that. So the first bullet, the first waterfall here, and the second waterfall really has not changed in any respect. You had the operating reserve. You designed to replenish that through a waterfall mechanism. If that's full, you've got the debt service funds. You've got to replenish that. If that's full, then it goes to the budget sustainability reserve to replenish that fund. Because remember, we have a 1% minimum target or whatever the so designated target that's designed to be at. And then fourth, again, this is establishing a further reserve of funds to be allocated to balance the budget in the subsequent next year's operating budget if needed. So that's a new element there. So if there's funds over and above the targets there, that's applicable as well and available. And fifth, the remaining fund balance then could be used for a specific purpose as outlined in the fund balance reserve policy. Those are footnoted down below, could include capital expenditures, debt reduction, or the establishment of other reserves or financial categories that could further strengthen Metro's fiscal health. So that last is sort of a catch-all bucket that's really designed to provide flexibility once all the reserves are fully funded. And I'm not going to go through the disclaimer, lots of really small bullet points there.
Thank you so very much for that very thorough presentation. We are going to bump up the agenda item number 6, RS 2025-1139. That is dealing with the fund balance policy. So we will go ahead and take that now. RS 2025-1139, a resolution adopting the revised fund balance reserve policies for the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, sponsors Porterfield, Allen, and Gadd. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. We also have an amendment. Can someone move the amendment? the amendment has also been moved and properly seconded. And we are going to Council Lady Toombs. Did I miss something? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. We are going to open up the floor for any questions or discussions on either the amendment or on the bill. I will entertain questions for both at this time. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized. Councilmember Allen, and then it'll be Councilwoman Sora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you for all this work and to provide a little history, since that's what I seem to be here for. Is we had a time when the charter only requires us to keep 5%. And we have lived through what it's like to only have that much cash in our back pocket, and it's not good. And so that sort of precipitated coming up with an official policy. So we thank you for doing it the first time. And I think this is really wise to do this. It's also important, I think, for us to communicate to our constituents the benefits of this. So thank you for laying out those very four specific benefits. Because maintaining this means that we raise money that doesn't get spent. It sits there and helps us to spend what money we do spend better. And I think it's just important to make sure that we have the opportunity to communicate that. So I support this.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilwoman Sora, you're recognized.
Thank you. And yes, I want to echo that. Thanks for the presentation. And it was very laid out and very easy to digest. So I think it's very good. But I do have some clarification questions. Very small ones, not a whole lot, to the finance director. The determination about whether these budget balancing reserve, the 1 to 6%, is this a one-time determination that the finance director does? And is it just at the budget period that you make that determination before we vote? Or does this change? That's my first question. The second question is that I do know that one of the reasons why it's a range of 1 to 6 is that in surplus years, like Joseph's dream, we have a lot more in reserve. In scarcity, we can reduce it. So does council have any input on this variation? And then the last question that I do have was about the surplus itself that we're reviewing annually, money that we've set aside for specific purposes. I love the fact that we want to revisit and see if it's been done. But the presentation says the funds will be returned to the original fund that it came from. Since these were surplus funds, do they go back into that surplus allocation that we have for that year? Thank you.
And you are recognized, Director.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, council member, for your questions. So when the Budget Sustainability Fund is actually established, it will be at every budget ordinance. So it can change from year to year. And the reason it's designed that way is so that in times of, if there's an economic downturn, if there is a need, we want to make sure that we have some money put away so that we can use those funds and actually, sustain the budget. So that was the answer to your first question. I'm going to come back to your second question, if I may, and then I want to talk quickly about the council. I missed that. Oh, the finance director has the authority to change that. So, so the finance director will change that as needed with every budget ordinance, lower or increase. Okay. And then the surplus on the location question. So let me use an example. If a surplus was generated out of an MMPS fund and it's not used, it then goes back to MNPS. So it would not cross funds. So if a surplus was generated in the general fund, then it would stay in the general fund, MNPS, and all the different tax funds. Did that answer your question, council member?
Councilwoman Sora.
Sort of, but I know that when we set up the reserve, one of the things that's happened over the years is that in the general fund, we always have these big surpluses that council has been able to allocate and use for things. And so I'm speaking specifically about those ones. So if we do have it come out of that and that project did not happen, then it will go back, not into the fund balance, not into the reserve, but back to a surplus that we can then use the following year or reallocate within that surplus.
No, it will actually go back into the fund balance or the budget sustainability fund. And then if it's not needed in the budget sustainability, then it would flow through into the surplus. So let's say you had a surplus that was, let's say that it was set at 2% as an example, and the surplus was 3, then that 1% would still flow down to council to be able to appropriate. Okay, you're welcome.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. I was really pleased in 2023 when we did this, and I think it's really important for people that are watching this to understand that if we had had this policy, the existing policy in place in 2020 or years prior, we would have not needed the 34% tax increase because the vast majority of that new revenue went into our savings account. I do find it very interesting to see that we are below our peer cities as far as reserves. And so I love these improvements. I love the sustainability fund. I appreciate the flexibility that it gives us to be able to sustain the operating. I would love to see in future years us get more to a 3-month or a 25% fund reserve. I think the more that we have there, the better, obviously, and it would put us into the range of where our peers, our other peer cities are, hopefully increasing our bond ratings, thereby saving us more money, but also creating that much more stability. So I'm obviously very much in support of this, but I want to continue this forward movement that every few years, let's see if we can do even better.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnston. Are there any questions on the amendment? Councilmember Spain, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just on those, the new additions to the waterfall section 4 and 5, where you can give the director the authority to establish reserves for other programs or to use that money for other purposes if it's not needed to replenish surpluses. Do those actions require approval of the council through the budget process or through a resolution or something like that? Or is that solely by the director's discretion?
So if we can go back to that slide too, if you want, but basically in that, if we set the budget sustainability at 2%, that would be in the waterfall. And then that becomes part of the budget ordinance, if you will. And then any surplus would be in the budget ordinance, just like you guys have, just like council has always had the ability to appropriate any additional surpluses. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else on the amendment? All right, seeing none, renewing the motion for approval. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? The amendment passes 11 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Can I get a motion as amended? It has been moved and properly seconded as amended. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 11 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. We have now established a new fund balance policy. Now we will go ahead and hit the consent agenda. Thank you. No, what? Tomorrow. Got a little ahead of myself there. Thank you. Well, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Thank you all so much for your wonderful in-depth presentation. All right, y'all, we'll go ahead and go through the consent agenda. The following items have been recommended for the consent agenda: RS 2025-1123, 1135, 1136, 1137, 1138, 1144, 1145, 1146, 1148, 1149, 1150, 1151, 1152, 1154, 1155, 1156, 1157, 1158, 1160, 1161, 1163, and BL 2025-781. Does anyone have anything that they would like to pull off the consent agenda? Councilmember Cortez, you are recognized.
Could we pull item 17 or 1148 and then also 1151?
Okay, 51 and 48.
Yes.
All right, and that is agenda item 15, yes, agenda item 15 and agenda item 18. They are off consent. Anything else that anyone would like to pull from consent? Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
This is RS 1138. I'm not sure what the number is.
Okay. Agenda item 5, that is now off consent.
Thank you.
Anything else that anyone would like to pull off consent? All right, I'll go ahead and read through the consent agenda. RS 2025-1123, a resolution approving a preliminary engineering agreement between CSX Transportation Incorporated, CSXT, a Virginia corporation with its principal place of business in Jacksonville, Florida, and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to facilitate bridge replacement over CSXT rail at West Due West Avenue. Sponsors Benedict Porterfield, Gamble, Parker, and Horton. RS 2025-1135, a resolution approving Amendment 4 to a parental assistance court grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Davidson County Juvenile Court to provide opportunities for and meet the needs of eligible low-income families who have a court-ordered child support obligation and to increase program participant parenting time with their children. Sponsors Porterfield, Walsh, Gadd, and Sorora. RS 2025-1136, a resolution approving Amendment 3 to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Davidson County Juvenile Court to establish and enforce federal and state mandated child support program guidelines for children born out of wedlock. Sponsors Porterfield, Walsh, and Gadd. RS 2025-1137, a resolution calling the Independent Metropolitan Board of Equalization into regular session beginning June 2nd, 2025, and special session beginning June 30th, 2025. Sponsors Porterfield and Gadd. The next item on consent is agenda item 11, RS 2025-1144, a resolution accepting a summer jobs Connect grant from the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund Incorporated, or CFE Fund, to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metro Action Commission to implement a comprehensive financial empowerment program that provides participants with access to safe bank or credit union products. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, Gadd, and Sorora. RS 2025-1145, a resolution to appropriate grant funds from the Martha O'Brien Center's Tennessee Opportunity Pilot Initiative Implementation Grant to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Action Commission to formalize the parties' relationship where collaborating on direct services, capacity building, collaborative activities, and grant compliance. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, Gadd, and Sorora. RS 2025-1146, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Housing Agency to negotiate and enter into a pilot agreement and accept payments in lieu of ad valorem taxes with respect to a multifamily housing project located at 3539 Dickerson Pike, known as Artist Lofts. Sponsors Parker, Porterfield, Gamble, Allen, and Gadd. RS 2025-1149, a resolution approving an agreement for the purchase of a half-acre parcel of property located at 1045 28th Avenue North for use in connection with construction of a new public library. Sponsors Taylor, Porterfield, Gadd, and Gamble. RS 2025-1150, a resolution approving an application for a Libraries as Pillars of Education and Democracy grant from the Carnegie Corporation of New York to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the National Public Library to implement leveled English as a second language, or ESL, classes at up to 6 branch locations in collaboration with partner organizations. Sponsors Porterfield, Gadd, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, and Sorora. RS 2025-1152, a resolution accepting an emergency management performance grant to the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Office of Emergency Management to subsidize the emergency management program. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, Gadd, and Sorora. RS 2025-1154, a resolution approving the application for a Project Safe Neighborhoods grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration, Office of Criminal Justice Programs, to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department to reduce gun-related violence in Nashville by providing funding for overtime for the investigation of violent crimes involving guns. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Ellis, and Gadd. RS 2025-1155, a resolution approving a contract between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and Remix Technologies, LLC, to provide transportation planning software for the National Department of Transportation. Sponsors Porterfield, Parker, and Horton. RS 2025-1156, a resolution approving a preliminary engineering agreement between CSX Transportation Incorporated, CSX, of Virginia Company, with its principal place of business in Jacksonville, Florida, and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to facilitate the development of proposed improvements to existing roadway under CSX Rail at First Street. Sponsors Coupin, Porterfield, Gamble, Parker, and Horton. RS 2025-1157, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement by and between the State of Tennessee Department of Transportation, TDOT, and the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by and through the National Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure, or NDOT, for the repair of several existing failures and resurfacing of 4.43 miles of Bell Road, State Project Number 19 SAR 1-S8-016. Sponsors Porterfield, Gamble, Parker, Ellis, Gad, Bradford, and Horton. RS 2025-2025. RS 2025-1158, a resolution approving a renewed intergovernmental license agreement by and between the State of Tennessee Department of Transportation and the Metropolitan Government of National Davidson County Metro through the National Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure, NDOT, for the benefit of the Metropolitan National Arts Commission to maintain public art within a state right-of-way. Sponsors Coop, Porterfield, Gad, Parker, and Horton. RS 2025-1160, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of National Davidson County, acting by and through the Department of Water and Sewage Services, to enter into a construction agreement and 6 pipeline crossing license agreements with R.J. Corman Railroad Company, Nashville and Eastern Railroad Line, to develop 6 pipeline encroachments and construct and maintain 6 pipelines for waste, raw, and finished water in the railroad right-of-way at 1400 Pumping Station Road and Pumping Station Road unnumbered in Davidson County. Sponsors Gregg, Porterfield, Gamble, Parker, and Horton. RS 2025-1161, a resolution authorizing supplemental agreement between the Metropolitan Government of National Davidson County, acting by and through the Department of Water and Sewage Services hereinafter called the license, and CSX Transportation Incorporated hereinafter called licensor, to abandon a casing pipe and to construct, use, and maintain sanitary sewer line in the railroad right-of-way along Hurricane Creek in Rutherford County. Sponsor Stiles, Porterfield, Gamble, Parker, and Horton. RS 2025-1163, a resolution accepting the terms of a cooperative purchase and master agreement for rental equipment for the Department of Water and Sewage Services. Sponsors Porterfield, Parker, and Horton. And BL 2025-781, bills on second reading. An ordinance approving a lease agreement by and between the Metropolitan Government of National Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Public Education and Municipal Communications 3 LLC. Sponsors Vo, Porterfield, and Gamble. I'm actually gonna, never mind. Okay. Is there anything else that anyone would like to pull off consent? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda passes 10 in favor, I believe. 10 in favor, 0 against, and 0 not voting. The first item not on consent is agenda item number 5, RS 2025-1138, a resolution approving the appointment of hearing officers by the Independent Metropolitan Board of Equalization to conduct preliminary hearings and to make investigations regarding complaints before the board. Sponsors Porterfield and Gad. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I pulled this just to get information. So this is not a group of people that we approve the nomination of. They are picked by so we're approving the appointment of hearing officers who are nominated by the Independent Board of Equalization. So I guess my question is, who are those hearing officers? Are they realtors, or, because that will never come before us. I just would be interested to know.
Director Darby, you're recognized.
They are typically people that have experience in the real estate industry. There's some that are more focused on residential and some that are more focused on commercial property.
And then we do approve the Metro Board of Equalization. Is that correct?
I believe that we do approve the Metro Board of Equalization, and then the Metro Board chooses these pursuant to state law.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item not on the consent agenda is RS 2025-1140, a resolution supplementing substitute resolution number RS 2010-1442 to authorize the execution terms, issuance, sale, and payment of water and sewer revenue, refunding, and improvement bonds in an aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $700 million. Sponsors Porterfield. Can I get a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Allen and then Councilmember Evans Siegel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is that part of this is to refund some earlier bonds that were issued in 2017 and 2021. And I remember at one point we passed a very specific requirement that the interest rate need to be like 0.5% better to improve, to make it worth the effort of doing that. So I'm just having a hard time imagining that the interest rate was better than 2017. So can someone address that question?
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Finance, you are recognized. If you could introduce yourself.
Hi there, Amanda Deaton-Moyer with the Department of Finance. Councilmember Allen, I think what you're referring to is the savings target, that we have to be above a certain percentage to have savings. And so we'll meet our debt policy, which is really 0.5%, but we'll look at each of those refundings and make sure that we exceed that margin. It'll be savings overall.
Councilmember Allen, I got a thumbs up. All right, Councilmember Evan Siegel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of this gets confusing because the news is really confusing, and it's been a really weird week and a half. And so one thing we had talked about earlier that I think people will have questions about with this one and the next item on our agenda is sort of given the market generally, like, is this a time to take bonds to market? And how does that play out in the world in which we live today?
You are recognized, Finance.
Thank you, Chair.
What's your name?
Mary Jo Wiggins, Finance.
Thank you.
We happen to have a part of our external bond team here today, so it was great timing to be able to ask that question, given all the volatility in the market. And I asked, is this really the best time to go to market? And he said, you go to market when you're ready. You don't try to anticipate the market. It is volatile. I mean, in the past, we have had an example when we go out to price the bonds, the day that we're actually thinking we're going to close the deal. If it's not at the rates and it's not favorable, we have the ability to pull back and not close the deal. Amanda was referring to the letter that we send to the state, which we have to send and get their approval, and it requires us to have that savings. It's good for 90 days. So we can go back out and try it again, and we can also not do the deal if it's not favorable. But trying to anticipate or play the market doesn't work, with these bonds. So we are ready to go. We go to market. If it's really ugly the day of, we pull back.
Thank you, Councilmember Evan Siegel. Do you have another question? All right, any additional questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries, 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item is our 2025-1141, a resolution authorizing the issuance, sale, and payment of federally taxable general obligation refunding bonds in an approximate principal amount of $61 million and providing for the levy of ad valorem taxes for the payment of debt services on the bond sponsored portfolio. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Soror, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Going in line with what Councilmember Vasingers was talking about, my question about this one is when I read it, it reads as if we're adding $61 million to our debt. And I know one of the things I love about the reserve is that actually it helps us not have so much debt because we can cover our own activities. So for this one, I just wanted to know if we're adding $61 million to our debt, what does that do on our debt ratio? If someone can just explain that.
Thank you, Councilmember Soror. Finance, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. We're not actually increasing the debt, we're replacing it. So we already have this $61 million outstanding, and we're refinancing it. So we're replacing it, so it doesn't affect our ratio. And it's not new. I mean, it's new, but it's not additional.
Thank you so much. Any additional questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item is RS 2025-1142, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and the East Bank Development Authority, sponsors Coupin, Porterfield, and Gamble. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any questions or any discussion? There was a one-meeting deferral in the previous committee. Would you all like to entertain a deferral? Councilmember Evan Siegel, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I would move to defer this one meeting.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion on the one-meeting deferral? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries for a one meeting deferral, 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Thank you, the Honorable Mendez, for being here today. RS 2025-1143, a resolution approving Amendment 1 to a lease agreement by and between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acted by and through the Metropolitan Board of Education and Connexion Americas, sponsors Vote, Porterfield, Gamble, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, Gadd, and Soror. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any comments, questions, concerns, any discussion? Councilmember Vo, would you like to withdraw this legislation? Councilmember Vo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Withdraw.
All right, thank you. Legislation withdrawn. The next item is RS 2025-1147, a resolution authorizing the grant of certain parcels of surplus real property to the Housing Fund Incorporated for the National Community Land Trust. Sponsors Porterfield, Gamble, Bowe, Tyler, Welsh, Allen, Gadd, and Soror. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say how good it is to see Angie Hubbard back in the back. Welcome back. And I'm excited that we're doing some more properties in the Community Land Trust. That's a great model. This was apparently a problem because it is so difficult to clear titles, and I know that the Housing Division has worked hard on developing expertise in that. So if maybe Ms. Hubbard or someone could just sort of address how we're working to keep that from being such an obstacle to enabling surplus property to be used for affordable housing.
Thank you so very much. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair, Council Lady, and Council Lady Allen. I'm Angie Hubbard, Housing Director, Metro Planning. First, to clarify, this is a regrant of properties that were awarded to the Housing Fund 5 years ago. When that transfer happened, which was before the Housing Division existed, there was a reversion clause that said if properties were not developed in 5 years, they return back to Metro. We have long talked about, since the Housing Division's been created, some of the challenges, not just with these properties, but the tax delinquent properties that have been made available through the Barnes Fund, title clearing, but also historically, staff had just really looked at the list that the Office of Public Property sends our way. Do they meet minimum lot size? Do they have street frontage? Okay, it looks like it might be developable. We'll put them out. What we have found is that really isn't good due diligence on our part. Title issues notwithstanding, which we're still working on, and I'll talk about that in a minute, we've actually had some other nonprofits tell us they've gotten into working on the infrastructure analyses, and it's still not feasible for a variety of reasons. So because of that, we've refrained from putting any new parcels out. We have hired someone on our team. She started in August. She's standing up the land bank, but also we have a list of over 100 parcels. She's going parcel by parcel, looking at working with our land development team. So this is one of the benefits of being part of planning, as well as Design Studio, to really say, is this feasible and what can we get? With the title clearing issues, as I mentioned, we did get funding to create a land bank. We have someone we brought on our team in August. She has joined a national network. Center for Community Progress. I always have to write that down because I confuse it with another organization. And she's also been meeting with Memphis, Chattanooga, and Oak Ridge, who have land banks, but they've also struggled. So before we present legislation to council, which we're looking to do this spring, we want to make sure we have the right legislation to enable it properly and get things going. But that would allow us to take advantage of some state law to clear title in bulk so the process would change that before we even made anything available to grantees, the title would be cleared. We would also really have that feasibility assessed, and we can be super intentional on how those properties should be utilized. For example, if a property could support a quadplex, we would want to see a quadplex. We wouldn't want to see a proposal that would just deliver one large single-family home. So it's that level of due diligence that as a new process improvement that we've created.
Thank you, Director Hubbard. Councilmember Allen, did you have any additional comments, questions, or concerns? Oh, just kidding. Okay.
Very helpful information. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 7 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item that is not on the consent agenda is RS 2025-1148, a resolution appropriating a total of $110,000 from a certain account of the Community Safety Fund for a grant to Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition to provide services to support victims of sex trafficking through rescues, assessments, intervention, addiction, and trauma recovery. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, Gadd, and Soror. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? Is there a second? Second, thank you. All right, it has now been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. In the legislation, it says 100 human trafficking rescues annually. Do we know, and I don't know who to address this question to, but do we know how many rescues we see in Middle Tennessee a year in regards to human trafficking, and how many people we think, how many individuals are caught up in that? Just trying to get a better understanding of the entire problem.
That is a great question. Thank you. Do we have anyone here who is able to speak to this? If you could introduce yourself, please. Thank you for being here.
Captain Cantrell, Metro Nashville Police, and I dropped my phone. As of right now, I don't have that information, but I'd be happy to track that down. If you're curious, I'm not sure who to reach out to on that, but I can find out for you.
Councilmember Cortez.
That'd be great. Supportive of the legislation. Just want to make sure that we're funding it properly in case to see how large the issue really is.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any additional comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none. Oh, Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just was going to say this will be on public health and safety tomorrow, so maybe if we could have that answer at that committee, that'd be
Yes,
great.
I should be able to get that for you.
Great.
That's awesome. Thank you so very much. You're recognized.
Chair, sorry, just to clarify, you're wondering about the numbers specific to Middle Tennessee, or are we wondering about the numbers specific to Nashville?
Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
If you could get both, that'd be great. But Nashville specifically, but if Middle Tennessee as a whole would be fantastic.
All right, I will work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cortez. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item is RS 2025-1151, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the claim of Davida Lenore as administrator of the estate of Sandarian Lenore against the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County in the amount of $175,000, and they set an amount to be paid from the self-insured liability fund sponsor Porterfield. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Cortez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Would the Department of Law be able to speak to this? Because I read through this, and maybe it's me. It's a terrible situation, but I don't know. I'm not seeing how it falls on Metro's shoulders. I'd just like to get their perspective on it.
Absolutely. We do have someone in the back here. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, Andrew McClanahan with the Department of Law. So a case like this really boils down to foreseeability. And so in this case, it falls under the Governmental Tort Liability Act. It'll be a bench trial. You don't have a jury. You just have to convince one person, and that would be the trial judge. And when you look at the foreseeability of a case like this, there's not really any precedent in Tennessee for this particular set of facts, but there are other cases in Tennessee where patients have jumped out of the window at a medical facility. And what the courts have said is that medical providers are required to exercise reasonable care toward a patient as his known condition may require, and the extent of this care depends upon the circumstances of each case. So here, this patient reportedly, 911 was called because he was reportedly having suicidal ideations and had a gun in his mouth that morning, and then a medical history was related that he had bipolar disorder, was schizophrenic, major depression, was off of his medications, and had admitted to some drug use. So under those circumstances, the court could take those factors and then determine that it is foreseeable that he might have attempted to jump out of the ambulance and then find Metro liable. So in a case like this, it's a close call. It's a tough one. It's a bad set of circumstances, and invariably because of this type of incident, the family is very sympathetic. And when you take those into account, there's a significant amount of risk if you were to take this to trial. And so here, there's a $300,000 cap under the Governmental Tort Liability Act. We've tried to get very close to splitting that cap, given that it is a close call and it's going to come down to foreseeability. And that's why we're recommending the settlement.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Cortez. You're recognized.
Thank you. That was very helpful. There was information in that description that wasn't in the analysis we got, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The next item that is not on the consent agenda is RS 2025-1153, a resolution approving an amendment to a contract between the Metropolitan Government and National Davidson County, acted by and through the Metropolitan National Police Department and the Mental Health Cooperative Clinical Personnel, sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, Allen, Ellis, Gatt, and Soror. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It has been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? One moment, friends. I am withdrawing this piece of legislation. All right, the next item is RS 2025-1162, a resolution approving the execution of the amendment to the agreement between the Metropolitan Government of National Davidson County and the Cumberland River Compact, amending their original grant contract and extending its term. Sponsors Porterfield, Parker, Welsh, Allen, Gatt, Soror, and Horton. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It has been moved and properly seconded. There is an amendment. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It has been moved and properly seconded. Director Darby, can we get an explanation of the amendment? Or do we have friends in the back who would like to give an explanation to the amendment? I will defer to our friends in the back. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Rebecca Doan, Metro Water Services, Stormwater Department. The amendment has two parts. The first part extends the contract to include properties within Davidson County. Originally had written residents, and of course, we want those trees planted on properties. So we are making that change, and the other change was to extend the contract term. It was set to expire in 2025, and we want to extend it to 2030.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this? Does this change the date of the beginning of the contract?
The original, no, it does not.
Okay. As amended, it does not, but the original does?
Yes,
So if we pass the amendment, it will not change the start date on the contract?
correct.
Okay, great. Any additional questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, although this is for the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Any opposed or any abstention? Anyone opposing or abstaining? Sorry, it's a long meeting, y'all. All right, 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. For the amendment, can we get a motion as amended? Second. Okay, great. The resolution has been moved as amended. Is there any discussion on the resolution as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Thank you so much for joining us today. RS 2025-1166, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle the Section 1983 class action claims brought by Peyton Pratt on behalf of herself and all other similarly situated property owners against the Metropolitan Government in the amount of $1,450,250.09, the amount of $1,445,250 $1,000.09 to refund all payments made under Metro Code 15.64.035 shall be paid from Fund 47335 or Fund 47346. The amount of $5,000 for attorney's fees shall be paid from the Judgment and Losses Fund. Sponsors Porterfield and Ellis. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. The last item, bills on second reading, BL 2025-770, an ordinance amending Chapter 2.40 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws relative to the Department of Law, sponsors Porterfield and Toombs. Can I get a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded. Was that a second, Councilmember Spain? You say yeah? Okay. I saw his hand go up, so I wanted to make sure. It has been moved and properly seconded. Can I get someone to move the amendment? Is there a second? The amendment has been moved. Do we have someone who can speak to the amendment? The sponsors are not here. Is there anyone from legal that can speak to it?
We're in support of all of the changes in the amendment.
Thank you. Can you give us
Macy
your name?
Amos from Metro Legal, sorry.
Thank you. Can anyone speak to what the changes are in the amendment so we can get it on the record, Director Darby?
So a couple of the changes in the amendment, it changes the settlement claims against metropolitan government. It had the original legislation had it going up to $35,000, and this would put it at $25,000, consistent with the other part of that paragraph. Also, it would require that the Metropolitan Attorney consult with the department head or their delegee prior to a settlement. And let's see. Yeah, the outside counsel provision. If outside counsel is engaged in the matter, there will be a report given to the council for all of these matters that don't come to the council, demonstrating the hourly rate of those attorneys and the total amount of funding paid. And that would include the attorney's expenses and the attorney fees as of the date submitted.
Thank you so very much. Are there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting? Amendment passes 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Can I get a motion as amended? It has been moved and properly seconded as amended. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have a question that shows I'm not a lawyer. So one of these things changes the indemnification for employees from $50,000 for individual things to $250,000 for bigger things to $100,000 and $400,000. Does that just incentivize people to come after us to raise that? I don't even know what it means that we are increasing that indemnification amount, except if I knew I could get more, I would try harder. So is that what it means?
Thank you for that question. Do we have anyone from?
It's not in the amendment. I thought we'd voted on the amendment. This is on the bill.
I'm going to kick it to either Director Darby or to Metro Legal, whoever would like to take it.
I believe that those amounts are consistent with the Governmental Tort Liability Act. Yeah, which was just amendment, and those are higher than, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Allen, go ahead.
So we're just moving to be consistent with some other standard that we're.
It's state law that defines the maximum liability under the GTLA.
Okay, and we want to be at the maximum liability.
Yes, we're moving into a direction that's consistent with state law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions or anyone not voting, motion carries 8 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Meeting adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.